And as I was on my side looking at the clock thinking this, I felt a shove to my back, which physically moved me in the bed. This was the scariest thing for me, and this was the turning point for me where I became a believer 100%.
Something caught my attention, and I saw what appeared to be a ribbon-like substance come through the screen door and travel across the room.
We're neighbors in a very unusual subdivision, experiencing some very strange things, such as, well, ghostly encounters, really, is what it is.
Mm-hmm. I guess you moved in when? Probably a month before us?
Spring of '99, yeah.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today we meet three people who believe they have lived next to the ghosts of the dead. When Julia Gorley and Sandra Ganesh moved into brand new houses in a new subdivision, their big concern was choosing paint colors and furnishings. But even though the houses were new, the land was old. It had other residents before them. And living with these residents was going to be a far bigger worry than finding the right colors and carpet.
When we moved there was nothing. It was desolate. It was farmland. And as far as we knew, it had been farmland for 100, 200 years. Of course, we had no furniture. We had nothing. The house was empty. And yet, from the first day that we moved in, I had this sense of not being alone in the house. Even when I was alone in the house, I would see these shadows and things that I couldn't sort of explain. Things progressed. I mean, it went from just thinking I was seeing a shadow to actually thinking that I was seeing the figure of someone out of the corner of my eye, or a face, you know, through a window or something. But as soon as I turn my head and look, of course, it's gone. We got a lot of knocks and banging and creaking, and my husband would say, well, you know, it's a brand new house. The foundation has to settle. The house will creak, the floorboards will creak, this kind of thing. And so I was fine with that. I was happy with that. Okay, let's just discount everything as the house is settling and whatnot. But it didn't stop. The creaking has progressed to the sound of footsteps up and down the stairs in the middle of the night, to the point where I get up out of bed and have to check to make sure that there isn't somebody actually coming up and down those stairs. We even had a cat in the early years that we lived there, and the cat was freaking out all the time in the house, running like something was chasing it, like something was pulling its tail kind of thing, crying and cowering in the corner. And this cat we'd had for a few years before that, when we lived in an apartment. Cat did not behave that way.
The first year I actually moved in, it must have been about a month or 2 months after, I kind of felt like there was like sort of like a heavy presence in the home. Didn't really mention anything to anybody, but I can sort of feel it. It was more or less I was sensing and picking things up. It was probably about 12:30, 1:45 in the morning. I was in my bed, and the carousel started playing. My carousel is something that you actually have to wind, and about one particular night, it seemed like the carousel decided it wanted to come on for itself. And it played a theme song, and it played for about a good 5 minutes. It woke me up where I sat and I watched it. I couldn't go back to sleep. I was too scared because I was just like, oh God, there's something in my room. And I was like, I didn't even want to take the lights off, or I tried to take the lights off and go back to sleep, but I couldn't. that's when I had talked to my neighbor, Julia, asking her if she has any strange things going on in her home. And then that's when she started talking to me about it.
I've had a couple of experiences in the bedroom, in our bedroom, that have been quite frightening, I have to say. My husband was at work that night, and I had been in bed for about 2 hours, tossing and turning, couldn't sleep and didn't know why. At 11 o'clock, I looked at the clock, and this is how I know I was wide awake. I turned over and I looked at the clock and I thought, oh, 11 o'clock. I have to get up at 5:30. I got to go to work. Why can't I sleep? And as I was on my side looking at the clock thinking this, I felt a shove to my back, which physically moved me in the bed. And I haven't talked a lot about this because this was the scariest thing for me. And this was the turning point for me where I became a believer 100%. Because I was still sort of on the, on the post, on the fence, thinking, I'm not sure which way I want to go with this. But at that point, I believed it 100%. I was scared out of my mind. I turned the lights on as fast as I could. I jumped out of bed. And I slept with the lights on for about a week. That was really scary. That was really scary. Things really started to progress after our daughter was born. About a month ago, she woke us up in the middle of the night and said, "Mommy, something's scratching my leg." So we just calmed her down and we said, "Oh, you were dreaming, honey, don't worry." But my husband and I were looking at each other thinking, this is not a dream. But we put her back to bed and we calmed her down. And then a couple of nights later, she came back into our room and said, "Something's scratching my back." My husband and I had literally about 6 months of things where nothing had happened, which is very unusual after having so many years of constant things occurring in the house. We had about a 6-month stretch of nothing. And we used to say, boy, it's so quiet to go to sleep now in this house. There's no knocking and banging and funny noises. All of a sudden, when 1 week, a stretch of a week, we were having 2 and 3 things happen in the course of a day, strange things. My phone went off and it was my dad. And he said, "Well, you know how you said that you had a stretch of nothing happening and now everything's happening again, like full force?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Have you heard about the Indian burial ground they've just found? A stone's throw from your house?" And I said, "No, I had heard nothing of this." He said, "Well, it's just been discovered that just up the road, just a short walk from our house, they have discovered an Indian burial ground." Now, there were construction workers that were expanding a road there, and they dug up what they think are about 100 bodies that are roughly 700 years old, and it's an old Indian burial ground. So as soon as they unearthed this, they stopped the digging and they called in the authorities and whatnot. And that's when all this strange stuff started happening again, that week that this occurred. The hole, I don't know for sure, I have to say, because now it's covered in the tarp, and the picture in the paper only showed a small section. But the tarp itself looks like it's maybe 15, 20 feet long, so it's quite extensive, I'd say. It's very close to the road, to the side. I mean, it looks like it's at the end of someone's driveway. There's a house there. I'd love to talk to those people and see what they're experiencing. Daryl's a good friend, and he lives just around the corner from us. What he's hearing is Indian tribal music coming from his basement, and he's heard that since the day they moved in. So many, many years before they discovered the Indian burial ground. We think there must be some connection. There must be. I mean, our little area of about 20 houses is the closest to the street, which is where the burial ground is. And other people that we know that live further away in the subdivision don't seem to be experiencing this. It's all just to the north. I think the land is very troubled because they've uprooted these Indian bones, which I think was was a horrible thing when it happened. I think that's very sad that, I mean, luckily that they stopped, and now they're going to try and preserve them, I think, in some way. But it was very sad that it happened, that they unearthed them to begin with.
When you interfere with a burial site, you're actually interfering with someone's resting peace. So they can't rest. They're sort of just wandering.
I don't feel that the spirits are malevolent, really. I mean, I did have a couple of sort of scary incidences, but it feels almost as if it's a protective force or something.
It's more like protecting our home and keeping an eye on our home. It's not doing any harm to us.
We wouldn't move. I don't know about you, but it wouldn't make us move. Not unless something serious
it's not making me want to
happens.
sell the house and just
No.
move. No, it's not like bothering me in any way. But I guess other people who aren't used to it or who is just really scared just wants to sell the house and get out.
Well, the turnover rate's very high.
High. Homes are selling within a week. People are just selling and going.
But
they're
it's a
just,
high percentage.
Yeah,
It's like
just about
65
every
to
week.
70%. I just took my daughter, when I took her for orientation for school, the principal was addressing all the parents there, and even the principal commented on it. And she said, this subdivision has the highest turnover rate. The last I've heard is that the Indian chief said that they didn't want it moved. They didn't want the burial ground moved. They wanted to stay right there, protected, preserved somehow. I think that's the right thing to do. I can't imagine if they start moving those bones, what's going to happen in my house.
Archaeologists believe that the burial ground is most likely Huron. When someone died, the Huron would bury the person in a temporary grave. Then every decade or so, all the dead would be gathered up and combined into one large grave during a community ceremony. In the Christian idea of death, the body decomposes while the soul flies up to God. But for the Huron, the body transforms itself into earth and so becomes one with the Creator. Huron burial grounds are holy, but not because they are consecrated. They're holy because the lands are imbued with the spirits of ancestors buried there.
I've always been the type of person who has an attitude of, I'll believe it when I see it. I haven't really had too many encounters with the paranormal, but I have had a couple that were very interesting.
Mark Pierce lived in an apartment in downtown Toronto. Like many who live in the city, he didn't know his neighbors well. But late one night while watching TV, Mark says he got to know one of them in a terrifying way.
I was sitting in my apartment. It was the night of Labor Day, 1999. I saw some form of apparition enter my apartment. I had an apartment in downtown Toronto. It must have been about midnight, and I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation on TV. And, around that time of night, you're a little bit tired because it's the end of the day. But I certainly don't hallucinate. I've never hallucinated. I was fully aware of what was going on around me. So I'm watching TV, and then something caught my attention, and I saw what appeared to be a ribbon-like substance come through the screen door and travel across the room. At the moment I saw it, I didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't sure. And then I looked at it and I thought, well, this isn't cigarette smoke. And I also noticed it had like a ribbon-like texture to it. And as I say, it traveled absolutely straight across. And so I'm looking at it and I thought, boy, that's unusual. What the heck is that? And it traveled halfway across the room, and then it did something very odd. It disappeared. The ribbon-like material disappeared, and then I saw, in between myself and the TV, what looked like a plaid pattern. I didn't see the outline of a person. that wasn't my experience at all, but I did see what appeared to be like a translucent plaid pattern, as if someone was wearing a plaid shirt or wearing some sort of plaid material, and it was right smack in between myself and the TV show that I was watching. In fact, I could see the image on the TV right through this plaid translucent apparition in front of me. And again, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. In fact, I remember I scrunched my eyes a couple of times, and then I opened them, and that apparition was still there. Just to fulfill my own curiousness, I leaned forward and I passed my hand through it. Now, I didn't feel anything. My hand passed right through it, but as soon as I went out the other side, it totally disappeared. And that's when I started to feel frightened, because I sort of processed it, and it kind of made sense what it was. And I realized I saw a ghost or an apparition of some sort. Several months went by, 6 months went by. The superintendent of my building was coming around to do some repairs door to door. He knocked on the door of my next door neighbor, and he knocked several times and she wouldn't come to the door. And because he had the master key, he was allowed to enter. They found the old lady who lived next door to me. She was sprawled out on her bed. She had expired about 6 months prior. The poor lady had no friends and no family in this world. She totally lived alone, and her badly decomposed body had been there for several months. The coroner came and wheeled her out, and when they did so, I noticed that there was a little bit of material from her nightgown that was exposed from the corner of the sheet that was draped over her body. And to my amazement, it was a plaid nightgown she was wearing. And so I put two and two together, and I realized that that must have been her ghost. I don't know whether she came in to my apartment because in some sort of way wanted me to know that she was there, or wanted anybody to know she was there. You know, maybe she just wanted to part from this world by saying goodbye to someone. And seeing that, you know, the poor lady had no friends or family, perhaps she chose her neighbor. I was absolutely shocked. It really put closure to the incident for me, because I had realized what I saw. There was no mistaking what I saw, that it was an apparition of this old lady next door to me. The feeling that that left me with will never, I'll never forget the experience. It was really something.
Though he never met his neighbor, Mark is sure that the apparition was her ghost. He believes that she didn't mean to scare him. Mark thinks that what he saw was the spirit of a lonely old woman saying goodbye as she left this world. Julie and Sandra believe they've seen harmless spirits from the Indian burial ground. Did uncovering the bones release the spirits into their houses? If so, would they be friendly now because the bones have not been disturbed since they were first found? Julia, Sandra, and Mark are convinced that they've been sharing their neighborhoods with friendly ghosts.
Definitely it's an Indian burial ground, but what else was it?
Yeah.
What else? I mean, it was obviously something quite significant for so many families in the same very close range in the neighborhood to be experiencing so many things. We'll never move. We love it there, and it is entertaining. And you know, at one point I would come home from work, and even though I knew I was the only one in the house, as a human being, as a person, I'd open the door and say, "Hi guys, I'm home," you know, and I wasn't addressing my husband. It was all these spirits or whoever in the house.
I've always known that science supports ghosts and spirits, because I've always known that energy cannot be destroyed. It just transfers form. You can't destroy energy. It just transfers from one form to another, and so on and so on. That's why, for example, water, when it's boiled, becomes steam. So that part of us which is not bones and flesh, it must go somewhere. It must, or at least transform to something, to some other type of energy.